Welcome to Life Sutras, where we have empowering conversations with thought leaders that will inspire you to be a healthier and happier version of yourself. We will explore science, the subconscious, as well as the spiritual. Good health equals harmony between many dimensions of mind, body, environment, and the unknown. Hi, I'm Anchal Bhatia, author of Your Doctor is Not God and How to Be the CEO of Your Health. I believe that health is by choice, not by chance. I am a clinical psychologist by education and an entrepreneur by profession, and a social change agent by passion. I'm a wife and a mother of 2 boys. My husband and I are one formidable team, and that's how we founded Sydenham Clinic, a private health management clinic here in Houston. Welcome and let's explore. Welcome back to Life Sutras for a very, very important episode before we get into the holiday season. And we're going to talk about setting healthy boundaries during the holiday season with our colleague here at Sydenham Clinic, Dr. Crystal Collier, and I am so delighted to have you. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today because I really feel we will be able to empower so many people out there who might be struggling during this holiday season. But before I start, I'd love to introduce our guest. She's a therapist, she's a researcher, she's an educator, she is just awesome. And she's just authored a fabulous new book called The Neuro Whereabouts Guide. And Dr. Crystal Collier has been working with adolescents, adults suffering from mental illness, behavioral disorders, and substance abuse since 1991. Her area of expertise includes adolescent brain development, prevention programming, parent coaching, addiction, family of origin work, and training new clinicians and school counselors. Dr. Collier created a comprehensive prevention model to create the neurodevelopmental effects of risky behavior to children, teens, and parents, which was selected in 2015 Prevention and Education Commendation from the National Council of Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Crystal teaches counseling skills and addiction classes as an adjunct professor. In 2018, she was awarded the Torchbearer of the Year award by Texas Association of Addiction Professionals. Wow. And in 2019, the Houston Counseling Association named her Counselor of the Year. In 2020, she published her long-awaited neurodevelopmental prevention book, The Neuro Whereabouts Guide, for parents and families who want to prevent youth and high-risk behaviors. Well, thank you for joining us, Crystal.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you reading that as well. It's been a great past few years for me too. Mm-hmm.
So for those of us who don't know you.
Well, let me then share that what you just read are all of my professional credentials. Now I'd like to share what I think really qualifies me to talk about these topics. And that's really my own story and my own family of origin. I grew up with a really loving mom and a stepfather who I adored, and we were pretty happy for quite a long time. I have this really great picture of me when I was a little girl, and we'd stop on Memorial Drive when the spring flowers were coming up, and you always stop and get that photo. But by the time I was about 11 years old, they had a lot of problems in their marriage and decided to divorce. So my mom and I moved to a different city, and she started going to school. My mom became a chiropractor during that time, and I was always such a good kid. I took really good care of her, everybody said. But when I turned 12, I was really starting to experience a lot of social anxiety, discomfort in my own skin, and my mom was kind of off doing her next thing. and just trusted me to take good care of myself. And so I started kind of adventuring out into the world, and we'd move every year to a nicer place, but it was tough to switch schools so much. So I thought it would be a great idea to meet people by taking summer school classes, which is not really the best choice. A lot of kids who have to take summer school have made some poor choices during the year. And so I got introduced.
I would believe so.
Yes. I got introduced to alcohol and then drugs. And then each school that I went to, it was almost like bigger and better drugs and older people. And I just really started engaging in a lot of risky behavior. But I made all A's. So I'd come home and I'd show my mom this perfect report card, and she just didn't know what was going on. And so by the time I was about 16 and a half, I had enough credits to graduate. I moved out, went to college, got an apartment, got a drug dealer, and I thought, oh, I am grown. I can do this adulting thing. And after about a year and a half of being in school, first semester 4.0, second semester 3.0, third semester, my health really started to deteriorate. I lost a lot of weight. My skin started pitting and breaking out. My hair was falling out in chunks. It wasn't good. And so right about my 18th birthday, I had an overdose that was pretty severe and went to the hospital. By the grace of the universe and my higher power, was taken care of and survived it. Then I reached out and I called my mom, and I made probably the most difficult phone call of my life. And I will never forget when she came over to my apartment. I opened my arms to her and she could see all the tracks, and just the look always brings up tears for me. The look of just sheer terror and disgust all at once. It's not what you want to see on your mom's face.
No,
it's just not.
I can feel the pain in your voice and your heart, and I'm a parent, so I'm just putting myself in her shoes,
Sure.
and how
Yes.
brave of you to make that phone call.
Oh, that was.
Because you had a choice.
Yes, I really did, but I didn't feel like I did. I felt like I've got to get help or I will die. I think having an overdose and surviving it gave me a bottom that was maybe shorter than it would have been otherwise. And so she helped me get into a rehab in Corpus Christi, Texas. And so I have been sober ever since February 3rd, 1989.
Wow, and thank you for taking on this journey.
Sure, exactly.
Because now you can talk from first-hand experience. You've been there.
I have, definitely. And so, as I got back into school after time in recovery, I had about 9 months in a sober living facility, learning how to work sober, have fun sober, do it natural, figure out how to deal with psychological pain in sobriety, learn how to have healthy boundaries with my mom and everybody else. Then I started working with kids and studying high-risk behavior and how it affects the brain. And so this book is really the past 25 years of my work as a therapist in this. It really has all of the research that I have studied in that time. And this has been kind of, the past couple decades have been really all about the brain. We've had functional MRI technology that is less expensive. And so now we can do longitudinal studies and really look at kids' brains who have eating disorders, alcohol use issues, not just drug problems, but kids who have anxiety issues and depression. We can see what it's doing to their development. And so that's why I really wanted to empower parents and kids to know the information they need. And it's not about just say no. It's about just say no. Know where your brain is, where your child not only is in the world, their whereabouts, but where their neuro whereabouts are. When I do these presentations at schools, it's amazing how kids, they want to learn about risky behavior. But when you show them pictures of how it affects the brain, it impacts them in a way that's deeper than just say no. Those campaigns that I had when I was a kid. where they showed your egg on a frying pan and said, this is your brain on drugs.
Kids are very intelligent today.
Yes.
They're very sensible, and they need to know scientifically what's going
Yes.
on. And, we've just launched a brand new genomic panel, which tells you your genetic predisposition to mental health and mental diseases. And I can't wait for you to start working with Dr. Rice on some of that, but it's literally brand new. It's something that we're launching this month. And if we combine that genomic information with all your information, I think we'll be able to help a lot of people. So I'm really excited about this whole new approach to mental health.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And I've got some genetic information in the book.
Yes.
That really can not only empower parents, but teach parents where to go and how to use the information. I mean, so my mom actually just read the book, and it was really sweet because she gave me 5 stars on Amazon.
Oh.
Sweet mom. And but she did say it felt like I was reading a book about all of my failures. And that made me really sad to hear that, because she didn't have this information.
No.
She didn't know, but we have it today. And if you know your child's genes, and you know you've got maybe one kid in the family who's that risky taker, you can actually tailor their prevention program to your specific child's genes.
Yes.
Yes. And if kids say, "Why are you treating me different from my sibling?" Well, you've got genetics that are a little bit different. So we want to make sure that you protect your frontal lobe.
Absolutely. And yes, I'm very excited about this whole new approach to personalizing mental health and mental health care. But I would really like to delve deep into a conversation about what's going on in the world today. There is so much more anxiety. 40% of people in America report anxiety in some form or fashion. 78% of Americans are stressed out about COVID. To make matters worse, 20% of people who recover from COVID or are recovering from COVID are reporting symptoms of depression and anxiety. During the holidays, anyways, therapists and psychiatrists see a lot more patients than normal. So we're really in a pandemic situation, but there's an equal, dire needs of strengthening ourselves emotionally and mentally, not just physically, to deal with this pandemic. And I'm leaning on you to tell our listeners today something that they can do to survive the stress that holidays bring about.
Sure.
And all the different challenges they're facing.
Well, I'm going to use that then as a segue into our title of Healthy Boundary Holiday. And so there are really 4 categories of boundaries: physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. And that first boundary, physical boundaries, really is more relevant this holiday season than I think in most. If you have extended family or you have a partner, you're negotiating so many physical boundaries. Do we have dinner there, at yours, at mine? Oh, there's all of that to negotiate. But this holiday in a pandemic, we've got a lot of our leaders are saying, don't go. But we're at a point now where we have been confined to our spaces, that not only the folks that have and are recovering from COVID suffering from depression, but a lot of kids and adults are suffering from anxiety and depression because they're not getting the same dopamine levels from the things we normally do. I miss my hot yoga so bad. Oh. And my studio's opening, but I'm not quite ready to go because my COVID anxiety is still pretty high. Yeah. And so I think learning how to be assertive with your boundaries in your space. And so it is okay to ask somebody to put on a mask. It is okay to say, hey, do you mind masking up for me? I just am more comfortable that way. To be able to stick up for your physical boundary, and I always think about the hula hoop. I use hula hoops in my office because sometimes seeing it and seeing, how big your personal space is and that you have the right to speak up for that. So having really low self-worth growing up, I had to really struggle with how to assert my value and my worth. I mean, I used to go to a massage therapist, and if I didn't like the way that they were touching me, I didn't say a word. I suffered for the whole hour, and then I just never went back. And then finally in therapy, I started to realize I have boundaries and I have worth. So what's in my hula hoop is worth sticking up for. And so now I am really good about saying, oh no, a little to the left or a little harder or a little less, and really empowering myself to say, this is my space. What's in it is worthwhile, and I'm going to ask for what I need. It's been it's been a lot of decades to actually work up to being able to say, this is what I want, and that's okay.
Because it can all stack up otherwise.
Yes.
And we don't want it to stack up.
No.
We want you to be able to deal with it.
Yes, right. And so what I've seen in my practice lately, in the past 6-9 months, is a lot of different anxiety levels in one family. And so couples who are really struggling because one person has a COVID anxiety level of 1, they're fine, they're great. They're like, no, let's go on vacation. And then you've got their partner who's a 9 or a 10 and doesn't want to go anywhere and is, using Clorox on everything. And then you've got your kids who sometimes are stuck in the middle of that. Yeah. And all they want to do is just socialize, have fun, and get out.
Yeah.
Or they're so stuck on their technology that parents are worried.
Yes.
And so I think that for the holidays, it's really important to be able to say, here's what I need, here's what I want as far as physical and emotional boundaries. And if this is something that's different from you, I just can't compromise on that. Normally, I would really coach couples to compromise, if you want this here or there. But I really want to encourage people to stay safe within their own physical boundaries and to speak up for that. And if that means, doing a little bit of separate holiday visiting, and having one person that needs to quarantine after visiting people, okay, let that happen. If you don't have to necessarily come to a compromise here.
Yes.
Right?
And also avoiding judgment.
Sure.
A lot of us have so much judgment around COVID and stigma around it, and we judge people's value system.
Yes.
And
yes. You're not taking care of me, or you're not, it doesn't have to come down to that black and white concrete way of thinking about it. Everybody has different comfort levels, and everybody has different beliefs in what science says. Right. And when we have leaders who actually have different viewpoints, that kind of makes it even more difficult.
Yes, it is making it political for no rhyme or reason. Baseless. This is a pandemic that none of us know enough about.
Right. So whatever your belief is, whatever your comfort level is, it is valuable and worthwhile, and you can stick up for it.
Beautiful. So we've learned how to become aware and conscious of our physical boundaries. Yes. And maybe that's something we all need to reflect on, because we never stop and really pause and think, what are my physical values? What am I comfortable with?
Yes.
Okay, my family stand may be X on COVID, but what is my personal stand? So exactly. That's wonderful. And the second one you said was emotional.
Right. These, I think, are a little bit more difficult to understand. Physical boundaries, it's pretty obvious. You've got physical space, things that people are doing, but your emotional boundaries are really about what makes you feel comfortable emotionally. And so when we engage in family activities for the holidays, sometimes we may be around people who act in ways that potentially make us feel emotionally unsafe, or we may be around people who have different ways of expressing emotion that maybe make us feel uncomfortable, or maybe just not the way that we would do it, or they communicate about emotions in different ways. And so I think that to have a healthy, boundary-full holiday means being able to know how you feel about being around other family members and setting limits about that. So if there's a family member that you've got to go visit because they're just a part of your family, but after 2 hours, you're pretty much emotionally spent, it'd be absolutely appropriate to say, all right, hon, I'm willing to go, but for 2 hours. So when it's the 2-hour mark, I really would appreciate it if we could go. And to have your partner understand why that is, and that your emotional boundaries are worthwhile, and that's valid.
That's
right?
the tricky part.
It's the tricky
There's
part.
so much drama that we hear about when families come together. And anyway, so it's going to be hard to navigate that conversation just in itself.
I think so. And so, you know, one of the most valuable things that I learned about marriage, I learned it from my therapist, Pittman McGehee, who also was an Episcopal priest. And he also married my husband and I. We did premarital counseling through him. And he taught me that the first 10 years of any marriage is all about power struggle. And I thought, okay, wait. Is this a good news or bad news? And it was beautiful because I've really experienced that in my own marriage, that it took us roughly about 8 to 10 years kind of power struggling back and forth until now we both really understand each other's emotional world and boundaries. I know my husband's emotional boundaries and he knows mine. And now we can actually negotiate compromises about that with being around each other's families for the holidays to figure out what works for us and what is our limit.
Right.
So, but it's taken some power struggling to get there.
Yeah,
It's
not
a little
everybody's
drama.
been married for 10 years and not got
Right.
the education you've
Exactly.
got.
But
so-
if you kind of know, okay,
Yeah.
that this is not going to be easy.
Right.
But when I say I'm ready and my partner's just hitting their stride,
Yeah.
maybe we just take 2 cars, and that's okay. And we let our partners have the emotional boundary and the emotional space that they need. Yeah. And I think introverts and extroverts are very different in that. Yeah. Sometimes we gravitate toward a partner because they're very extroverted, because we might be introverted. Yes. But that means there's some differences around holiday get-togethers and family issues.
And I think with physical confinement, it becomes even more important to give that space and that emotional boundary, because you're not able to give physical space. Very often, we have the luxury of travel and going for girls' night out and boys' night out and going to meet your parents and my parents. And you get that breather. So you've never felt the need to consciously give emotional space. But I like your suggestion of becoming a little more mindful.
Sure.
The emotional boundaries.
Yes. Okay, well, I've got a question for you, because I know you have a big family.
Yes.
And how do you guys negotiate some of those boundary issues?
So culturally, there's no concept of boundaries in India. You go to India, you'll see there's no concept of physical boundary also. People will just stick to each other, stand in line. There'll be 5 people in one car coming out, So we don't get the concept of boundary as Indians. But, I'm a little more mindful of my personal boundaries and my space and my energy and when I feel depleted. And we've been pretty good in finding our balance and getting individual me time in spite of us being that we are 5 people in one home, and then we live in the same. My sister lives a few condos above us, and my grandmom and my mom and my parents live like a mile away from us. So there's some in and outs, who's walking in, who's walking out, nephews coming in. So we've just embraced no boundaries, and that's our way of really coping up with this and having fun with it. That this time's never going to come back again. Just enjoy it. But
that's pretty nice. Does everybody feel that way in the family?
My kids struggled a little bit in the beginning because they needed time to homeschool, and they didn't want some kid coming in the background in their school, and they would like to lock up. But I think it's been a good learning, because we also need to develop, adapt and tolerate and learn to cohabitate.
Exactly. And so many parents have asked me about that because they're worried about their kids. I've got a section in the book about resilience and how to assess for trauma, because each person, each kid is going to handle those things differently, but we are resilient. Yeah. And teaching our kids how to adapt and flex, these are good executive functioning skills that will benefit them when they grow.
Yeah. COVID is going to leave us with a lot of life skills for sure.
Very much so.
Yeah, I mean, you're surviving this, you're going to survive this with a few new skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, for our kiddos that seem like they're really struggling, there's some amazing help in the community.
true.
Right? There's a lot of really good clinicians that work with children and work with kids and help them learn how to process those things and then positively reward them for being resilient and bouncing back.
Yeah. And seeking out for help cannot harm you.
It can't. It really can't. I know that, I think we talked about this the other day, that somebody said to me, oh, I don't believe in therapy. And I thought, well, it's not a religion. You know, there's nothing really to believe. There's so many different theories about psychology and cognition and behavior. Why not come learn about new ways of thinking, new ways of acting, and how to handle your feelings that maybe in more natural ways that you didn't even know could expand your vocabulary and your repertoire?
It's empowering you. How can empowering be bad? I mean, any amount of help is good.
Sure.
It's a step in the right direction.
Definitely. But it can be really scary. I remember learning in school years ago, a professor said that about 8 people out of 10 drop out of therapy after the second visit. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I ever going to be able to make money at this job and make a living, right? Yeah. If that's the case. But I think if you're a good clinician and you understand that opening up and being vulnerable is a scary thing to do.
Yeah.
And you meet people where they are and the stage of change that they're in, and you don't go too fast until they're really ready, I think is important. Yeah. And that brings me to the third boundary, which is intellectual boundaries. Now, I was really surprised to hear about this. I had no idea there was such a thing. But an intellectual boundary is the idea that what you know, what you value, what you believe is important. And that when other people try to come in and convince you that you're wrong and that that what you're believing is not valid, that's an intellectual boundary violation. Now, we've seen kind of a lot of this going on in our political climate, right? Yes, exactly. And it's kind of scary because sometimes if you watch a certain news channel or you get certain news feeds that draw from a specific intellectual body of knowledge, that may be all you believe in. And so I always really think it's important to get a wide variety of views.
I think the vaccines is a good example of that, right?
Yes, right. You've got a lot of people who are anti-vacciners, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what you call them.
Yeah, vaxxers.
Exactly. And I think that it's really important too, even if you disagree with their intellectual body of knowledge, that you still validate that they have a right to believe in that. Now, I think that the behavior and how that affects other people has to be looked at. I mean, we have to keep our society, our communities, our families as safe as we possibly can. So making sure that you look at the wide variety of knowledge for everybody is important. Politically as well, really being able to see from both sides of the aisle and the middle of that, to understand that there are a lot of different varying opinions and ideas. And some may be more valid than others, but that doesn't mean they're not valid at all. Wow. And so to be able to look at this from an intellectual boundary standpoint, I think brings you to a little bit of a higher level of thinking. Yeah. That thinking is what I refer to in the book as dialectical thinking. You know, we start off in life being very concrete, all or nothing thinkers.
Black or white.
Black or white. Yeah. And that's a normal way that kids think. But as we grow and develop, especially when our frontal lobe starts to develop, we grow abstract understanding. We can understand concepts in new and different ways, and then we move into this kind of continuum where there's the black and white and the gray. There's a higher level way of thinking too. I actually read that about only a third of our population achieves that higher level of thinking called dialectical thinking. And of course, when I read that, I thought, okay, well, I really want to be able to achieve that way of thinking. But a dialectic is something that is true and false all in the same moment, but they don't cancel each other out.
Yeah.
So there's the black, the white, and the gray. So you might like this. My favorite dialectic is that I can love my husband and hate my husband all in the same moment. They don't cancel each other out.
I can relate to that. Totally relate to that.
Exactly. Some people sometimes feel guilty about coming into therapy and speaking negatively about a family member. Well, it's okay to experience what you're experiencing, right?
So bring in some level of objectivity for your own stress levels' sake.
Yes. Very
It'll
much
help you
so.
lower your anxiety. It'll help you deal with this difficult time.
Exactly. Yes. And to know that what you believe intellectually, your knowledge base, hopefully it's a wide variety of information that you're pulling from, but that it's valid and that somebody doesn't have the right to make you believe something different.
And it'll help you detach and be more emotionally, ready to take on diverse viewpoints.
Right. So when you go to your partner's family for holidays and they have different political views or they have different vaccination views that are very different from you, if you know that they have an intellectual boundary just like you do, then you can go in with maybe even a more mature, more humble, more respectful way of respecting their boundaries and
Beautiful.
asking others to respect yours.
Beautiful.
Good.
And I know what your last boundary is, and I'm super excited to learn more about that because I never thought of having spiritual boundaries. Wow. Tell us more.
Well, I love this too because I find it very fun to ask people, what's your religion and how do you practice? Although that sometimes feels scary to open up dialogue for people like that. But we do all have spiritual boundaries as well. Yeah. And there's a beautiful dialectic about the idea of a higher power. And that dialectic is that it can be all or it can be nothing or it can be everything. Is that whatever you choose to believe spiritually is valid and worthwhile and absolutely okay to stick up for. And to not have to be pressured into believing in a different way that you want to believe. Now that idea can be very controversial because in some families, in some cultures, you do have to believe in the same thing. But I think that as we grow and evolve our prefrontal cortex into higher levels of thinking, there's room for a lot of different ideas about what the universe has to offer.
And sometimes when you're on a spiritual journey, you feel you're discovering the truth.
Yes.
And you can go on to this path of the black and white thinking of, well, this is the truth. We're discovering the truth. And you want others to see it, like drink, from this fountain of wisdom. And you feel that, but sometimes that can be equally like a trap that you're being very opinionated about that opinion. It's still your belief.
Yes, exactly. I love that you use the word truth because, I work with so many adolescents and what their truth is at 11 is very different to what their truth is at 11 and a half or, or 14 or, we grow and evolve. And, I'm 50 this year. I just turned 50 in May.
You look lovely.
Thank you very much. And my spiritual beliefs have really changed and morphed. And I'd like to say evolved over the years. And I do believe that I've become more accepting of a lot of different people's ideas. And being able to accept other people's spiritual boundaries, even if they're very different from mine, ideologically different, I can still respect other people's beliefs and ideas. I'm kind of one of believing that everything is true and that everybody has a spiritual idea and belief that can be true, even people who don't believe at all in anything like that. And that maybe I really don't know and maybe will never know exactly what the truth is, but I can respect that yours may be different from mine.
Wow. Well, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
sharing these 4 different boundaries that we all need to reflect and think about. I have a surprise question for you.
Okay.
All my guests on the podcast, I always ask them a question, and you make whatever out of the question that you want to.
Okay.
But I want to know, what is your secret sutra? Now, sutra means rules in Sanskrit.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your secret sutra?
Oh, I love that question. That is such a good question. So, my secret sutra, my own personal rule that I live by, is to this will make me cry, is to be very loving and compassionate to myself. So one of my biggest issues growing up, as I shared earlier, was I didn't feel very worthy. I didn't have a lot of esteem. And so I treated myself poorly. I used substances. I acted out in risky behaviors. I gave away my sexuality in not so respectful ways and suffered a lot from those things. And I've also found it difficult to find really meaningful relationships as an adult. And for many years in my 20s and then even into my 30s, was so desperate to be liked that I allowed people into my life that really didn't fill my spirit. And now I have a mantra that says, Crystal, you are perfect because you make mistakes. You are perfectly perfect. So being loving and caring to my own self makes me feel more worthy. And then that makes me know that my boundaries are really firm, and that I'm only going to allow things into my boundaries that fill my spirit. And that means truly reciprocating types of relationships that fill me as equally as I fill them, and loved ones and career choices that I think are fulfilling. And that's why I'm really happy to be here and to be a part of this team. So thank you. Yeah.
So thank you. That is a very empowering sutra. Love yourself, love your mistakes.
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, we'll see you back here at Sydenham Clinic, Houston on Life Sutras.